Hello and welcome to News Centre. I'm Parikshit Luthra. The Karnataka High Court has dismissed Twitter's petition against takedown orders from the union government. Justice Krishna Dikshit also imposed a 50 lakh rupee penalty on Twitter for not complying with the government orders in a timely manner. The case was about 10 blocking orders issued by the government to the social media company. The court ruled that Twitter's plea was devoid of any merit and it must have complied with the law. Justice Dikshit said he is convinced by the government's stance that it not only has the power to block tweets, but can also block accounts. The case was closely tracked with many experts, seeing this as a challenge to freedom of expression. It also highlighted companies' relationship with the government. Just last week, Elon Musk, the new owner of Twitter, met Prime Minister Modi in New York. Speaking to the media, Musk said Twitter has no option but to obey government's orders in India.
Twitter doesn't have a choice but to obey local governments. You know, if we don't obey local government laws, then we will get shut down. So the best we can do is really to hew close to the law in any given country. But it is impossible for us to do more than that, or we will be blocked and our people will be arrested. So one cannot just apply, America to Earth, because Earth is not. They have different rules and regulations and different forms of government.
There is ample room to grow. Ample room to grow lawfully, ample room to grow even in compliance with the Indian law. So therefore, I hope there is a learning from this for Twitter and indeed for all platforms. And of course, to Shri Jack Dorsey, that the government of India's expectations always, previously and today and in the future, will always be simply this: compliance with the law.
All right, let me take this forward with Apar Gupta, Executive Director at Internet Freedom Foundation. Mr. Gupta, thank you very much for joining us. Apar, I would like to ask you, according to reports coming in, the court has said that the Twitter, being a foreign company, cannot claim rights of freedom of expression and personal liberty under Article 19 and 21 of the Constitution. What do you think will this mean? Will this order mean for Twitter working in India and for future orders from the government for blocking of certain accounts?
Thank you so much, Parikshit, for having me on your show. As we speak right now, I've not had the opportunity to study the judgment by itself, given that a copy of it was just made available to me by another journalist about 2 or 3 minutes ago. So I'm going by the press reports. I wanted to indicate that, given that there are about 6 determinations which have been made by the Karnataka High Court in dismissing most of Twitter's claims, and going by what you have just told me, that Twitter does not have the locus standi to claim free expression or Article 19 rights, that does fit in within a pattern of precedent in which companies are not considered as natural persons like you and me. So they don't have the ability to claim the fundamental right to freedom of speech and expression, which is why a lot of press freedom cases also, which were filed in the past, such as challenging government restrictions, used to also have an actual journalist as well as another person as a co-petitioner in that case. So that is a small technicality. I think the bigger and the larger question which I'm curious about is how the court has dealt with the claim that the Section 69 powers, which allow the government to block websites, are not communicated to the end users who are using a platform like Twitter. Why is the secrecy, and how is that secrecy being upheld? I think that's something which is a little much more curious for me to look at.
We're also getting a sense that Twitter had argued that the government in each of the cases had not given reasons for blocking a particular account, and Twitter was also in favor of blocking certain URLs, not the entire account in some cases.
Yes.
What do you think will this mean for the user and the future approach of the government?
So, as per parliamentary responses, as well as core aggregate data, which is made available through what are called as transparency reports by online social media platforms, India is one of the most censorial countries in the world when it comes to issuing directions, both for blocking content in one way, censorial, and the second is for user information account requests, which means surveillance. Okay, so I think this order, if it goes unchallenged without appeal by Twitter, will lead to a much more frequent exercise of the blocking power under Section 69A. That's one. Secondly, it will be done through a process of what we call as selective transparency, in which the actual legal orders itself do not contain reasons, they are not communicated to end users, and sometimes press releases around them are made, and the orders by themselves may contain just a list of URLs rather than specific reasoning as to what is illegal on each specific URL. The URL, as Twitter has also argued, may be there for an entire account rather than an individual URL. And let me also illustratively give an example why this is problematic. Quite often, the censorial function is playing to a political interest as well, rather than a pure legal function. For instance, there were requests from the government of India which were disclosed by Twitter just as URLs, which were asked to be blocked by the union government to Lumen database, which is a transparency portal. And it concerned the URLs of the farmer protests, such as the Kisan Shakti Sangathan, etc., etc. So I think there's a fundamental problem in the law today, in which it provides secrecy, and I'm very curious to know how the Karnataka High Court has upheld this specific challenge by Twitter itself. And concerning the other thing which you said, that Twitter was in favor of blocking specific URLs rather than entire accounts by itself, and the court having upheld that, I think that is an argument on proportionality, right? Quite often when certain statements are made by an account, that specific tweet, that specific post may be withheld. But a direction to block an entire account itself, as has been done in the past for BBC Punjabi, for instance, is sometimes considered disproportionate, right? So I'm curious to know what are the reasons behind this this order, and I really don't have, I've not gone through the judgment, Parikshit, to get into what are the merits and how does it objectively hold up to case law and our constitutional rights.
Apart, we're also seeing that the court has imposed a 50 lakh cost on Twitter.
Yes.
Do you think it's almost certain that Twitter will challenge this in a Supreme Court? And if this judgment, if this order goes as it is, what happens to the right, the legal recourse of an individual? If tomorrow an account of individual A is blocked, do you think the government in court can once again cite this judgment, saying that the government has this power and this has already been upheld?
Three things here. One, the order on costs are for about 50 lakhs. Yes, you're considering the owner of the company now as the richest person in the world. But the reason which is for the imposition of costs is the delayed compliance by Twitter to directions by the central government. And this delay in compliance has been explained by it as a lack of clarity, as a direction which does not seem legal within the powers which the government has by itself, which is why it went to court. And before going to court, it did comply with those orders. So it's not like they did not comply and costs have been imposed with a government order or with a court direction, or have done or conducted themselves in legal proceedings which are improper, for instance, made false declarations. So the order on costs is somewhat significant. It's curious for me, for it penalizes an entity for approaching court for just claiming fundamental rights of freedom of speech and expression for its users. It's almost seeming like a penalty rather than costs. Second, I think the government will cite this decision. In fact, your broadcast itself had the Minister of State for Electronics and IT thumping on the decision as a validation of the government's directions and practices on blocking of websites. And third, where does it leave the user? I think it leaves the user without remedy, because the user does not know why their account has been withheld. They are not communicated reasons. They are not provided an opportunity of a hearing. quite often, and this is taking place in a much more widespread manner than it was being done years ago. And every month, every year, this is a practice which only increases in its in the frequency in which user information is blocked, not only on Twitter but Facebook, Instagram, and other social media channels as well. So I think what we can guess today is that a lot of people will be reading this judgment. I don't know if Twitter will appeal it. I hope it does, because to my mind, this is a significant judgment which will also stand on its corporate record. And in addition to that, will mean a significant, will cause a significant impact on how social media interaction occurs
running out of time.
World's largest social media market, which is India.
Okay, we've run out of time, but Apar, thank you very much for joining us on that big story. Clearly, there will be ramifications of the Karnataka High Court order. Let's see what happens and whether Twitter challenges it in Supreme Court or not. Moving on to the big political